Oh, you guys are here already? Welcome to the Forensic Corner. Today we are going to discuss our last part of body language analysis. I hope you enjoyed it so far because I did. And today the last part is filled with a lot of mysteries and a lot of analysis. So sit back because this is going to be one heck of a roller coaster.
So, guys, today we will also be thriving out how a conclusion to a case was drawn which had a major roadblock in ever changing statements by the suspect.
By the way, the case which we are going to witness today is also streamed on Netflix. You know what's the name? It's Amanda Knox. If you have watched it, you're going to enjoy it a lot. If you haven't, do watch our session to find out what is the case about Amanda Knox.
Also, we are going to explore about the O.J. Simpson case. So, let's check out.
Have you seen cops standing like that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Or probably your parents standing like that when they're angry?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that is a high power display and it is an authoritative stance. See over here is Suzanne Morphew and this is her husband. So she went for a bike hiking. So she went on. He's saying disappearance. This in forensics is called psychological distance. No, I don't love you. We miss you. No, we don't miss you. I want you as back as possible. No, he doesn't want you back. So she had a problem saying that whoever has my children, the tongue out, the tongue jut. This is called tongue jut. We'd be looking into NLP, eye accessing patterns, neuro-linguistic patterns for eye accessing. Now, you have seen when you ask somebody, so let's talk about the myth wherein people say you break an eye contact when you're lying or you avoid an eye contact when you're lying. That's what people say, right? But that is false. That is incorrect. Because if I have to tell you just the way that I was saying that which was the best event that you had in your college and you're thinking you're breaking an eye contact, that doesn't mean you're lying. You're just trying to recall, right? So whenever you're trying to access different parts of the brain, the eyes will move accordingly. So we're looking at like this. So if I'm sitting like this and I see a person right in front of me, then cha, my best birthday. Oh, there was this incident that happened. So, top right, that's your visual recall. Just by looking at the eye patterns of a person, you can figure out what the person is trying to do with his mind or brain. So if the person is looking towards his down right, which means the person is thinking, should I answer that or not? Should I talk to him or not? There's a lot of internal conversation that is going on. Now, I ask you, where were you yesterday? And if you had to tell me the truth, you should have been looking at top right. But you're looking at top left and you're telling me I was studying. I would definitely get suspicious around it because you're trying to construct an image for me. And of course, I will not accuse you there and then. I would ask you more questions around it. Okay, great. So what were you studying? So, that's how I'll get you because I know that I've got a cue from there. To get it more clear, it is like this. Visual recall, auditory, self-talk. So, for example, there was this friend that I was sitting with and I was having a cup of tea and he was looking to his down left. And I knew that he's thinking something and he has some feelings going on. Something that he must be thinking and something that's associated with his feeling. So I asked him, I hope you're feeling all good. He says, yeah, some old things. So, this just helps you look into the person's mind. And these are called NLP, eye accessing patterns. But let me tell you, when you're looking at person, there is so much to it that you will not be able to see, at top right, dekha hai, to he's doing this. It will not strike because the eyes move really quick. They move really quick. This was one of the most talked about cases in Italy. So you see this lady, this girl apparently, they made a series on Netflix called Amanda Knox. So she used to live with her two roommates. And she used to work at a bar. And one day she comes back and she finds that her friends and herself, uh, that her roommate, one of the roommates is dead. Her name was Meredith. So two roommates other than her, and there is another one wherein the roommate is dead. and she gets suspicious because of the statements that she's giving. And interestingly, you know what's a cartwheel? What you do when you do a cartwheel? So she's made to stand outside the police station, yeah, and she's doing cartwheel. And the cops were like, you're here for interrogation and you're doing cartwheel. And she said, what do I do? I have to pass my time. So she started doing cartwheel outside the station. And the kind of statements that she was giving, they were completely bizarre. So I'll show you the first 5 minutes. This is one of the most interesting cases for which a lot of analysis is done. You can watch her later on. But remember the chart that I just showed you for NLP. Okay? Top right, middle right, whatever that you can remember. And watch her eye movement. And you have to write down what is it that you observed. Have a look at the case. Now the case is some details. So the lady who got murdered, or the student who got murdered, was Meredith Kircher. She got murdered and her throat was slit. And apparently it was found that she got sexually assaulted also, and the body was covered with a blanket. Now Amanda Knox comes back to the cottage, which she shares with Meredith, and she does not have a great rapport with Meredith. Now she was with her boyfriend the previous night. She comes back and she sees there are specks of blood, and she sees that she thought probably it is menstrual issues, so she does not get suspicious initially, but later on with her statements she was found to be the major suspect. So I'll play you the video, have a look and see what is it that you notice about Amanda Knox.
I remember thinking, I don't know what to think. Because when I went back to my apartment after the house, but like we had the upper floor, so it was our apartment. And I found the front door open, and then progressively found other things like spots of blood in the bathroom and feces in the other bathroom. I remember thinking, I don't know what to make of this. No one was home, which was also like a first. I knew that one of my roommates, Philomena, was at a party the previous night, so it was wherever she was. And my other roommate, Laura, I didn't know that she was on business in Rome, but she was on business in Rome. And actually, when I called Philomena, she confirmed that to me. And I didn't know where Meredith would be. But granted, she also has a whole bunch of English friends. And so I had seen her the evening before, or the afternoon before, going out to meet them. And so I thought, well, maybe she's out with them, or maybe she's still asleep. When I first went in, it was very strange to me. And I didn't know what to think because, yes, the front door was open, but everything looked normal. Everything that I saw just in walking in the front door, going to my bedroom, and going to the bathroom, the various bathrooms, everything looked completely normal. So I did not think there's been a break-in. I just thought, okay, well, the door doesn't work very well, so maybe someone didn't close it all the way. And then once I saw the blood in the bathroom, and the feces in the toilet, I thought, okay, well, that's really weird. First of all, the blood in the bathroom, like, it wasn't a lot, so I didn't assume that someone had been murdered. I assumed that either someone kind of hurt themselves or there was menstrual issues, and they hadn't been cleaned up. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe somebody ran out really quickly and is coming back. Maybe someone went downstairs into the apartment below. I didn't know. But when I saw the feces in the toilet, it actually creeped me out. Because that was just very unusual. And so I left feeling creeped out. I locked the door and I left and I went back to Raphael's and I kept brooding over it. He was in the bathroom and brooding over it. I had brought a mop from my place because there was water on the floor in the kitchen. His pipe had gone loose. And so I was doing that, I was mopping that up, and immediately after he got out of the shower, I was like, tell me if I'm crazy, Raphael. Like, what do I do about this? And he immediately was alarmed and was like, no, you have to call your roommates, figure out what happened. Something happened. And so I tried to call Meredith. Her phone didn't answer. I tried to call Philomena. Well, actually, I tried to call Laura, and her phone didn't answer. Then I called Philomena finally. And she was very alarmed by it. She said that she hadn't been home that night. She had been out at the party, and that I should go and check it out. And so I thought, okay, but I'm going to go with Raphael. And so we were gathering ourselves, and we went back to my apartment. And I was already feeling very creeped out. I was like clutching to Raphael. And we were looking around, and we actually opened Philomena's door, and that's when we noticed the window was broken. So I immediately thought, oh my God, there's been a break-in, and I started running around. I went into the other bedroom, which was Laura's, but it was spotless. Like nothing had been touched. Her bedspread was pulled like so wonderfully clean, like a hotel. Like she was a clean person, which is why it struck me so strongly that in her bathroom, of all places, there would be feces left in the toilet. I was like, no, Laura's the clean one. So her bedroom was fine, which struck me as very odd, because it's like, if someone breaks in, like, they're not going to worry about.
Okay. She is a very interesting individual. Even after years of case, so she got arrested, then she got an acquittal from the court, then again she came under the scanner. So this was one of those interviews. She's trying to recall that what had happened on that day. So yeah, so my friend has died, my roommate has died, and I was arrested for it. And there are no emotions, no anger.
Yeah.
I got arrested, right? My friend died, so there should be sadness also. No sadness, no anger. Instead, there are strange smiles and laughters, which is completely out of the context. Okay. Very important thing, which is a very important red flag. Swallow. She was doing a lot of swallow. If you ask a question and the person does a deep swallow, there were at least 4 to 5 deep swallows that she did. So I opened the door, swallow. And then I called up Philomena, swallow. Swallow is a sign of distress, emotional distress, as per David Gibbons. He's an anthropologist. So if someone says and okay, when somebody says and, my friend came over and we went to meet another friend. If when you're taking a statement and somebody uses a lot of and or so on, these are time hiding devices, which means they don't want to tell you something, what happened in between. This is the concept of interrogation. Somebody uses a lot of and, or somebody uses a lot of and so on, we came back. What happened in that period? Tell me what happened in that so on, what you're saying. So these are time hiding concepts. You might want to use that. So even Donald Trump does that, wherein, when he's talking and he says America wants to build a wall at Mexico. So keeping those eyebrows up, and he looks at people, I know that you'd be. So this is called getting a confirmation from you. Are you with me on this? So keeping your eyebrows raised for like 3-4 seconds is seeking an approval. So whatever story that she's saying, she's seeking an approval from the person. Now the best part is the person is saying nothing. The interviewer is saying nothing. The interviewer is letting her talk. She's falling into her own trap. So there's a lot of deep swallow that she's doing. Deep swallow is a sign of emotional anxiety, embarrassment, or a lot of stress. Now, whatever that I've written, 0.18 seconds, there was a swallow, and she says, I found the front door open, downright. She's looking downright. She's talking to herself. Ki mujhe kitna batana hai? How much should I go ahead and tell you? Now, as I am about to say something important, the rate of speech is slowing down, because I might just tell you something which I shouldn't be telling you. She says Philomena was at a party the previous night, and as she says that, So she has her eyebrows raised. So she's saying that, which means she's trying to convince the other people, you're buying my story, right? So she's doing that. My other roommate, Laura, I didn't know if she was on a business. She confirmed to me. And again, everything looked normal. So she tells her that I look 152. She says going to different bathrooms and she does this. This is called fear. She's doing this. When Prashant, you were talking about the mouth. So fear comes here in mouth. So when Amitabh Bachchan is doing Kaun Banega Crorepati and the contestant has given a wrong answer and he already knows it, so he does this a little bit. This is a sign of fear that comes in mouth. And she says, I was going to various bathrooms. And Prashant, you said it very nicely that why is she talking more about feces? We're talking about murder. She's talking about feces. She's talking about menstrual issues. She's getting amused around it. She's not talking about the actual thing. So deep swallows a lot of it. Now that's really weird. I didn't assume that someone had been murdered. Either someone hurt themselves. Psychological distancing, softening of severity, because murder is a difficult term. I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to say that when I'm watching someone or when you have to see, everything can be broken down into seconds. Within seconds, what is it that I saw? And 333 page, she says her phone didn't answer. She already knew she was no longer there. Instead of saying she did not pick up the phone, her phone didn't answer because she knew she would not answer. Look at the terms. Okay. A little bit about statement analysis. If you want to study more about statement analysis, you can write this guy's name. I've already taken his name, Mark McLeish. He was the American Deputy Marshal, who's the pioneer in the study of statement analysis. We look into the first case, the word actually. When somebody uses the word actually, it means that the person is comparing two options and would give you that option that you'd like to hear and would suppress at times the actual option. So, did you buy a new car? Actually, I bought a new truck. So he's comparing the car and the truck and then is giving you actually. So somebody is telling you, did you commit that robbery? And you would say, actually, I was at home. So I would not say the actual option, but by saying the word actually, I compare two alternatives and I'll give you the other alternative. Actually is an important word. And she was talking about the doors and she used that word actually. What did you do last night? Actually, I went to the movies. Because I cannot directly say, so I take the word actually so that it justifies. So next time when you're listening to someone or reading something from someone, it'll give you the intention of it. Either you say yes or no, but people have a problem, so they'll start using words like actually. So O.J. Simpson, a famous Afro-American football star, he was there all over, killed his wife and killed his wife's friend, ex-wife. That's the blood. And there's a series, People versus O.J. Simpson, on Netflix, in case if you'd like to watch. And he gives a statement which uses the word. So he's on TV on January 15, 1998, and the host says, are you capable of killing somebody? And he interestingly says, I would say actually, I would say no. Even though I'm sure if someone was presenting some imminent threat to my kids or something, I'm sure everybody would be capable. So you see, he's using the word actually, and also he's socializing the threat. Wherein socializing, he says, मैं क्या मेरी जगह कोई और भी होता तो somebody would have done the same. So trying to reduce the severity of the crime. If somebody does a partial shoulder shrug, the way that you see in the presentation, it means a person has no confidence in what they're saying. The person can be lying or the person can be concealing. Partial shoulder shrug. This was given by Dr. Paul Ekman. Okay, that is another. Now, for instance, you ask your friend, shall we go and watch Avengers? And your friend does this. Rubs his eye and says, okay, sure, we can watch Avengers. If the person does this, rubs his eye in response to what you said, it means the person did not like what you stated. So you might want to reconsider your statement. try changing the statement and talk to him again. Why? How about, watching something on Netflix? He says, yeah, sure. So you might want to change your, statement just by watching his body language. Oh, I just got away with something, puffing. That's another thing. Touching of the face. This is the last thing that I'll talk about. Touching of the face. This is a stress pacifier. There are a lot of nerves on the face. So when you ask somebody and somebody starts touching his face in response, that is to pacify his stress. It's a stress pacifier. That is why people touch face. So, and so is for the nose touching also. I'll give you an example. I was traveling in metro and there was a boy who was sitting right across me, and he was sitting in lady's seat, and his feet were crossed like this, and he was playing something on his phone. So there was a girl who came and stood right next to him, and the moment she came and stood right next to him, he started touching his face, and I was observing from across, and he kept watching. Would she go? And 2 minutes she kept standing there. He kept touching his face. The moment the girl got a seat somewhere else, his hand came down and he started playing the game again. So touching of the face is a pacifier. And for girls, the neck. For the boys, the face. The girls, for the neck. And especially this area, this bone that you see, this is called suprasternal notch. Suprasternal notch. If a girl or a lady touches this in response to what you've said, it means distress is happening. Distress is happening. You might want to reconsider your statement and change. Which part of the body do you think is the most honest in terms of identifying deception? Feet. Your feet are the most honest part of your body. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you listen to a music that you really like on the radio. Your favorite song starts playing. Automatically your feet will start tapping. Or, you're told your exam results are about to come. They were about to come tomorrow. Today they are coming. So your feet will start moving. Oh, result check karna hai, right? You want to run away from a person, and the person is standing and your feet is like this. So one feet will be towards him. The other feet will be towards the door. Watch out for the other person's feet. If the one feet is pointed towards the door, the actual intention is the person wants to run away from you. Now, why is feet the most honest part of the body? Because the feet is connected to the limbic brain. And your face is controlled by the neocortex. So I can lie with my face, I can have a poker face, but I cannot have a poker feet. The feet will give you the answer. So it is the feet which has a lot of truth to it. And there is something called as micro expressions by Dr. Paul Ekman, wherein actual expressions get revealed through the face in 1/5 of a second. That is why, see, when they do corporate interviews, of course, they do not know this. They are not taught this. But if you want to know the actual intention, if you have a table in between, because of which you cannot see the feet of the other person, that will be a very big obstacle. When you're trying to interview somebody, try to watch out for the person's feet. Withdraw their feet. So for example, if I ask you, did you actually do your assignment? And immediately, and if you've not done it, your feet will go behind the legs of the chair. You will lock them. And then I say, you've done it, but has somebody helped you? And then you lock it more tightly. Then I get all the more sure that, definitely somebody's helped. Always extend empathy, but think logically and rationally. That's important. Else it will sidetrack your inquiry or investigation.
I like hats. What about you guys? I think wearing a hat boosts my confidence. Wait, it's not suiting me. Okay, never mind. Now I think I have wore it, so let it be. Ignore what I said. So this session we witnessed body language analysis, how body language analysis was used to interpret the different case studies, and most important, we witnessed the famous Amanda Knox case. So it was an adventurous ride, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you guys for showing your support and love towards the Forensic Corner, because that's the place where questions meet answers. And stay tuned for our upcoming videos and subscribe to our channel to never miss a video. And we will keep learning. You should also keep learning, because that's how we will advance towards the scientific community. So keep learning, keep investigating.